Hey, everybody, welcome. We've got some people rolling in here. Hi, welcome everybody. If this is your first Sales Hacker webinar and you don't know me, my name is Colin Campbell. I'm the General Manager at Sales Hacker. Happy to have you here today. If you've been here before, welcome back. You know how it is. We like to keep these very engaging and active. We know that you took some time out of your day to be here with us today live rather than watch the recording later. And that means you should, take advantage of that. You can ask us questions. You can ask questions of our expert panelists, and you can talk to each other. So to do those two things, let's start off first. Go down to the chat box down at the bottom of your screen, open up chat, and let us know who's here. Share your role, maybe your location, a fun fact about yourself, your favorite kind of sandwich, whatever you want. I know you can't see how many people are here as an attendee, but there are a lot. So if you fill up the chat box, you'll know you can have conversations there. If you want to ask questions of the panelists, we will take some questions throughout. We've got some breaks for that throughout the talk today. Just pop them in the Q&A spot instead. So that make sure we see them for you. And we're going to get started really quickly here. One quick note is that one of our panelists is having fire alarms tested today. So we hope it doesn't happen, but if it goes off, we're going to hit pause for a second, and we've got some, what do we call it, like backup activities that I actually think are kind of exciting that we'll do instead. So if that happens, get ready to participate, because we have some things that we'll do while we wait for fire alarms to stop going off. So with us today, we're talking about how every seller, hopefully all of you or all of your employees, can become really, really amazing communicators. And here I am saying very self-consciously, it happens to you too. So it's hard to think about how you communicate, and this is why you need to practice. And that's why with us today, we've got Jay Noble. He is an award-winning actor, director, creator at Alliance Theater and Alliance at Work, amazing communications coach. And we've also got Debra Cancro. She's the head of voice analytics at VoiceVibes, which is I'll plug so you don't have to, Debra. I tried this out this morning. It really is some amazing technology that can tell you about how you communicate. We'll get into it later a little bit, but if you haven't checked out VoiceVibes yet, check that out. So we're gonna get started. Welcome to everybody who's saying hi in the chat. Looks like a really great group of people. Somebody from Rotterdam, Manila, San Francisco, all over the world, Belgrade. So cool. All right, welcome everybody. Really, really appreciate you being here. I'm gonna step back now for a minute and hand it over to you, Debra.
Thanks, Colin. Hi, everyone. So I'm Debra from VoiceVibes, and we're now part of Big Tin Can, a sales enablement platform. But at VoiceVibes, we spent years collecting data around voice and people's speaking styles, and specifically how we're perceived by others. So we analyzed millions of data points about human perception and produced research that we're sharing today to truly help you or your reps be more engaging. Did you know that when a speaker does not sound confident, people are 8 times less likely to want to listen to them? Not 8%, 8 times less likely. And when it comes to sales, people are 13 times less likely to want to buy from someone when they don't sound confident or authentic. So this creates 2 simple driving questions. Are your people sounding competent and confident when they speak to prospects or customers? And how do you know if when they speak with customers, they're really ready? Like they're really ready to go in front of a customer or prospect and convey a new message that you have. So today is all about helping you answer these 2 questions. And with that, I'll hand it over to Jay.
Thanks, Deb, and hi, everybody. My name is Jay Noble, and I will be your learning tour guide today during the session. As Colin mentioned, I am from the Tony Award-winning Alliance Theater here in Atlanta, Georgia, in the States. And I suspect that today is the first time many, if not most of you, are hearing about the Alliance Theater for the first time. but I suspect you are probably familiar with some of the shows and productions that had their start right here in Atlanta on one of the Alliance stages. Just to name a few, The Color Purple, the musical, started here in Atlanta. Elton John and Tim Rice's adaptation of the opera Aida started at the Alliance. My personal favorite, and it's going to get a few giggles, I'm sure, is Bring It On, the cheerleading musical. It was written by Lin-Manuel Miranda, who I suspect you've heard of from Hamilton fame. And most recently, the show that opened our season 2 years ago, Ryan Murphy just turned that into a Netflix movie musical. It's called The Prom with Nicole Kidman and Meryl Streep. It was on Netflix back in December. The mission at the Alliance Theater is to expand hearts and minds of our audiences on stage and off. And that world-class theater we produce, which is why we got the Tony, is how we fulfill the onstage part of our mission to create new works that go on to have a life on Broadway or the West End and national and international tours. But I run Alliance at Work, which helps us fulfill the offstage part of our mission. Alliance at Work helps clients nationally and internationally accelerate leadership development, improve team effectiveness, and shape organizational culture through theater. Now, don't worry, we do want this session to be interactive, but I am not an improv coach, so at no time will I ask any of you out there to pretend in a very dramatic fashion that you are a melting ice cream cone, or put yes and at the end of every sentence. But to explain why we do what we do and our approach, I'll share this quote with you from the director of the London School of Economics. And she says the jobs of the past were about muscle, and the jobs of today, they're about the brain. But the jobs of the future, those jobs are going to be about the heart. And what she's getting at there is, well, think about it. As the digital revolution rages on, and as automation and machine learning become more and more a part of our everyday way of working, from manufacturing to professional services, that which makes us human is going to be one of our strongest competitive advantages. And that is where theater comes in. Theater is the study and observation of what makes us tick. And then theater artists use their emotional intelligence to create something with that information, to cause their audiences to think and feel and respond in very specific ways. So from architects to attorneys to accountants, from the front line to the C-suite, we've even worked with nuclear plant managers. In Alliance at Work, we help our clients to create customized learning experiences that are experiential, to challenge and equip folks to become better leaders, team members, storytellers, creative thinkers, and emotionally intelligent human beings. And what we leverage from the world of theater is the concept of rehearsal, because the performance you want takes practice. And too often in our professional lives, we don't carve out enough time to let us rehearse. And the way we define rehearsal in theater is an opportunity for folks to come together and explore concepts and to question and to discover and to try things and to fail at those things and then try again, so that we eventually find the best solutions to make the right decisions to get the job done. So today, welcome to rehearsal, and we'll be practicing how to apply these skills in what I'm going to call the actor's toolkit to improve your sales game. And the skills in the toolkit are not unfamiliar to you. It's the skill of being present and genuinely connected to other people in what you're doing. It's about staying open and curious in those situations. It's about making intentional choices to know what you're doing and know why you're doing it. And lastly, to make sure you're being authentic in your interactions. The skills in the actor's toolkit are fundamental to creating a powerful and immediate performance on stage or in your business. You can apply the skills in the toolkit to all aspects of your career because they help you bring your best self to your work so that you perform at your best. In today's rehearsal, then, I am going to share a technique, a tip, and a tool that are all going to rely on the skills in the actor's toolkit so that you can bring these concepts to your team so that they are able to show up with more presence and purpose on their sales calls, so that they're able to engage more authentically with prospects and customers, and be able to move past the stress of a sales call so that they can close the deal. And then, as Deb mentioned earlier, how we can marry the art and artificial intelligence to use technology to help you provide really useful and meaningful feedback on these skills, and so that your team can get past those challenges that are with us in every stressful situation, so that they not only appear confident and competent, but they are those things, and they're bringing those to those sales interactions. In other words, the big idea of today's session is no more boring explainers. I'm sure we've all run into a few of those throughout our week. Let's get to it. The most effective way you can bring your presence and your confidence and your competence to a sales call is to make sure you're breathing. Now, I'm sure many of you out there are going, hey, Jay, we got this one checked. We are breathing. We're all conscious and alert and listening to you. But I suspect that in stressful situations, you're not breathing in a way that grounds you, that calms you down and clears your head. We have a natural neutralizing, stabilizing instrument within each of us that can normalize and reduce the amount of stress we perceive and react to, whether that stress is real or fictionalized by our thinking. If we just become a little bit more conscious of it, we are able to lessen the stress, particularly when stakes are high. We just simply forget to breathe in this way that gives us the benefits of being calm and clear-headed. But this type of intentional breathing takes practice, because when we're in the moment and stress is upon us, we simply forget to breathe in this way. So we're going to rehearse this intentional breathing. So I invite you to work along with me as I demonstrate. Now, the first thing I want you to do before I lead us through some intentional breathing is to think back to your most recent and most stressful sales call. Really use your imagination to place yourself back into that situation, as uncomfortable as that might be, and try to get into how you were physically feeling in that circumstance. And then I want you to take the palm of your hand and place it on the upper part of your chest, that bony part of your chest, and I want you to pant. Are you panting out there? Well, you can stop. You can put your hand down and stop panting. I suspect as you were panting, that felt very familiar back to that stressful sales call, because we tend to breathe quickly. We tend to breathe shallowly, and at times we hold our breath all together. And the reason we do that is as a natural body response. When we perceive a threat, real or imagined, when we encounter stress, it triggers the amygdala. That's the oldest reptilian part of our brain. That is where the fight or flight response comes from. And when that's triggered, because we've got to get going, we breathe up here, which is not positioning us for success in these types of situations. What we need to do is position the breath from up here down into our gut. And it's a very simple reason we're focusing here is because the largest part of your lungs are down here. So to ground yourself, to calm yourself down, to clear your head, you need to engage the full capacity of your lungs. And that's what takes practice. So take your hands and place them right below your rib cage, sitting on the top of your stomach. And maybe roll over a bit so that you, it's as if you're holding your stomach, and let it go flabby. No one can see you, so just let it go. And as you do that, see if you can get even more of a hold on this area of your body. And now I want you to imagine that this area is a balloon. And when we inhale and exhale moving forward, I want you to feel your hands gently rising and lowering with the breath. Really focus on taking that breath all the way deep into the lungs and filling out and letting go the full capacity of your lungs. So let's first just do an inhale and an exhale. And in and out. In and out. Now, as I said before, you won't be able to access this type of breathing unless we practice, because we've got to get over the hurdle of what that reptilian part of our brain is telling us to do. So I'm going to share with you some homework that will help you practice, but don't worry, we're going to practice the homework in this session. And it's simply breathing in and out on a count. And keep your hands here so that you can help position the breath where we intend it to be. And we're going to start with a 3 count. I'm going to go in, 2, 3, out, 2, 3. And I want all the air to go in and out on the 3s. Here is my caution. It's quicker than you think it's going to be. So I don't want any leaky tires on that second 3. So when I hit that 3, I don't want you to have to push all the air out. Or because I've said that, just don't cut it off altogether, which is, don't do that. Make sure that you're fully inhaling and fully exhaling in that short count. Here we go. Let's try it. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3. Hopefully there weren't many leaky tires there. Now, in the homework, we're going to go all the way up to a 6 count. In, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, out. Now, here's my caution with the 6 count. Some of you are going to tap out on that 4 count. It's like, I don't have any more room to go, Jay. This is why the homework works. It makes you intentional with the pacing and the depth of your breathing. You're building muscle memory so that you'll be able to access this kind of breathing when you need it in those times of stress. So all the air in and out on a count of 6. All right, here we go. In, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. How'd you do? Hopefully you made it past that 4 count. Now, the homework is to do a full run of counts, starting with the 3 count, then a 4 count, then a 5 count, and then a 6 count. So here we go. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3. In, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4. In, 2, 3, 4, 5, out, 2, 3, 4, 5. In, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, out. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Cleansing breath in and out. And now I have a few questions for you. The first is, how many of you out there are a bit dizzy or lightheaded? How many? Generally, no matter what size group I'm working with, about 10 to 15% of people say they're dizzy or lightheaded. The reason that is because you have developed a pattern of breathing. And it could be just today, maybe today's particularly stressful, or a larger pattern where you're used to breathing up here and engaging your body with all that oxygen. It's like, hey Jay, what are you doing? I think this feels good, but it's a little unfamiliar. The good news is the more you practice, the less dizziness and lightheadedness you will encounter. For the rest of you, I suspect you're feeling more calm, relaxed, grounded, probably have a little more energy and a little more focus. Intentional breathing, I believe, is foundational for us to bring our presence and connection, our curiosity, our intention, and our authenticity into any situation. And when you're able to bring that breathing into an interaction, it will be transformational to that exchange. Now, we all have vocal patterns. I tend to be a loud, fast talker. Some of you out there will relate to me. On those sales calls and you're driving toward the conclusion, we'll take a big gulp of air and try to say as much as we possibly can to plead our case. And when we do that, we're limiting the breath we're taking, so we don't have enough breath support to sound our best. By the end of all of that we're sharing, our voices might shake a little bit, and we're not coming across as that confident, competent person we know ourselves to be. And it's simply because we're not remembering to breathe. When I'm doing a live session with folks, after we've gone through all the homework, I'll ask them to find a partner and stand about 1.5 feet away from that person and hold eye contact until I tell you to drop it. You can blink your eyes, but maintain eye contact. And I usually have them hold eye contact for about 40 seconds, which is not a long amount of time. And then I'll ask them to drop eye contact, and I'll ask them, how many of you out there stopped breathing? Oh, and about 1/3 of the people like, oh, I definitely did. And then I'll ask this question: how many of you out there aren't even aware if you're breathing or not? And then, oh, another 1/3 of like, oh, that's me. And I'll say, I know a handful of you were breathing because you were trying to make your partner laugh, or you were engaging in nervous conversation or nervous giggling. And this is after we've gone through maybe 15 minutes of intentional breathing, and they're with me like, Jay, yes, this makes so much sense. I know, I get a sense of how foundational and transformational this can be. But moments later, they revert to their old patterns. When we find ourselves in an uncomfortable or awkward or stressful situation, we often even hold our breath. We've taken that big gulp of air, we've engaged in the way that we want to, and then we're trying to take another big gulp of air. I challenge you to do your homework around this technique, so that when the other person is talking, instead of holding our breath, you're filling in the full capacity of your lungs, you're de-stressing, so that when it comes your time to step into the exchange, you can do that freely and easily and completely. And then when it's your turn to talk, I suggest you practice taking a breathing pause. And think about this breathing pause as just a gentle intake of air about every 10 words or so. It is going to take practice. It's more difficult than you might imagine because we're not used to doing it. And about every 10 words or so, or is about when we would have a period at the end of that sentence. A gentle intake, giving us enough breath support to say the next sentence before we take another gentle intake to share more. When you intentionally breathe in this way, you are going to be able to listen and think as you speak. You're being deliberate with your pacing, which allows your brain to keep up with what you're saying. But it will also help your audience, the person on the other side of that sales call, keep up and process what you're saying. It's not just that they're hearing, they are listening with understanding. So before we go to the tip of the day, let's take one last 3 count before we move on to the next part. Here we go. In, 2, 3, out, 2, 3. Thank you. And a most helpful tip from the world of theater would be to consider using the concept of something called the second circle in your sales calls. Now, the second circle is a framework created by a director and actor coach out of the UK called Patsy Rodenberg. And Rodenberg says, no matter what we're doing, we are always operating out of one of 3 circles of focus or energy. We can either be in first circle, that's got an inward focus. It's as if we contract in our bodies and our voice. We go into our heads. Or we can go to third circle, which is an expanded sense of being, outwardly focused. Or we can find second circle. And on these sales calls, this is where you want to be. Second circle is having the right balance between self-awareness and presence and awareness and connection to other people. Now, you can experience any thought or emotion or behavior in any of these circles with differing degrees of intensity. But because human beings love patterns and routines, you have a favorite circle, first or third, one that is habitual to you. And this is going to be your favorite circle that, depending on the situation, you reach for. And first and third can block your ability to be present and connected with your experiences and the person on the other side of that sales conversation. So I'm going to describe first and third, and as I do this, I want you to think about situations where you find yourself in first and third, and why is that? And what does that first or third behavior look like? So first circle first. First circle, as I said before, shows up in your body and your voice. It's as if you're contracting. First circle moments are when you find yourself physically pulling back from people or feelings or ideas, when you're holding your breath or breathing quickly or shallowly. You might notice that people are leaning in to hear you or asking you to repeat yourself. When you're feeling self-conscious and you're trying not to attract attention, you're going to find yourself in first circle. Now, why do people reach for first circle? It could be you're in an unfamiliar situation and you're uncertain of what your role is there. Maybe we should have prepared a little bit more. So I don't feel like I've got my 2 feet underneath me. It could be that we're tired or bored, or you've got a lot on your mind, or you're feeling intimidated. So you might tend to withdraw into a self-focused position. And then there's third, an expanded sense of being. These are times when you feel and notice other people might be pulling back to give you more space because you're demanding it. You may sense that you're laughing or talking too loudly, and you don't really pay attention to who you're speaking with. It's when you might jump into the middle of a conversation where you've not heard all the bits of that conversation from the beginning, but you're trying to control the outcome of that dialogue. When that voice inside your head said, "Hey, Jay, you need to inject some energy here." It's those moments where you want to be noticed, to attract attention. Again, a very self-focused point of view. Now, why do people find themselves in third? Well, for a lot of the same reasons you would go to first. It's an unfamiliar situation. You're uncertain of your role. I'm unprepared, so I'm just going to have to wing it. It could be that you're passionate about what's going on, and you're letting that energy overtake your focus on your scene partner and keeping it on yourself because you have a need to prove yourself. Now, before I open it up to a chat and any questions about first and third, let me say this. It sounds like, oh, I'd never want to be in first or third circle. And that's not what I'm saying at all. Certainly there are times when we can be reflective and thoughtful and quiet. And certainly there are moments when we can let it loose a little bit. But if the situation requires that you show up present, connected, really curious, open to learning, making those intentional choices and why you are doing what you're doing, and creating space for you to bring your true, authentic self, if those are the moments in the way that you need to show up, that's when you need to find and maintain second. But if that's the way you need to show up, we need to be aware of what you habitually gravitate toward, first or third. It's in those moments you need to be aware of how you react to those situations. So let's chat about it. You've got two options here. If you want to populate the chat with your thinking, here is your prompt question. How have you seen first or third circle negatively impact the outcome of a sales conversation? And then I also want to open it up if you have any general questions about first and third circle, when and why we find ourselves there. So I'm going to pause and let you think and type, and Colin's going to pull up some of your comments and questions for me to respond to, and we'll start a dialogue. Colin, I await you sharing their reflections.
Coming right up. Give them a minute.
Sure thing.
We did actually get a question earlier, Jay, from Andrew in Arkansas. If you're aware of and maybe a fan of the Alexander technique.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I am. And that technique really is about listening to the body and making sure that you're creating that mind-body connection. And the breath is a great way, a really easy tool that we all have to make sure that we're reminding ourselves physically to be present and to be calm, and let our bodies tell our brains, you got this. Don't listen to that negative roommate in your head, as loud as that voice can be. Physically engaging, making sure we do that, just don't live in our heads, are going to position us for more meaningful and useful interaction.
Interesting. We have a comment from Morgan Manzer, an observation. Thanks, Morgan. Morgan says, in a competitive deal, being in first circle doesn't project a lot of confidence, and the other company competing for the prospect's business owns the narrative for what the prospects perceive as the pain, as well as the solution. So it kind of positions you in second place if you're in a competitive deal.
I would respond to, I know that was focused on first. Third circle, which seems in control, can come across as too much in control. Again, first and third circle are self-focused. Second circle, as we'll learn in a bit, is focusing on our scene partner and being able to respond to what's going on in the moment versus react. Sometimes I think third circle people, and that's one of my favorite to go to in those kind of situations, so I'm preaching to myself, that feels energized. It might feel good, but it can be a very disconnected way of having those conversations, which also could put you in that second place position if that other person is showing up in a very authentic way.
Is third circle am I in third circle if I find myself waiting for somebody to finish talking so that I can say something that I want to say? Am I more a third circle or first circle mindset at that point?
So second circle is going to be listening for understanding. When we try to listen to respond, that is more than likely a third circle space. It could also be a first circle, depending on what's motivating that. Am I wanting to figure out what I'm going to say to sort of hide behind that comment? Or am I trying to figure out what I'm going to say so I can control the outcome of this instead of sharing the outcome of that conversation? And I would say this before we move on to more about second circle itself. I think naming things is very important. I think there's power in having that language around first and third so we can have conversations with ourselves and your team. That very act of asking ourselves, am I in first or third, is a second circle behavior. It helps bring us back to where we want to be. But don't get hung up on, is that first or third? The true question, am I present and connected? In other words, am I centered and alert? Am I comfortable? Am I noticing details of what's going on around me? Am I picking up on the emotional cues of the people I'm interacting with? Am I curious about new ideas or what's being presented versus being judgmental about it? Another thing I'm constantly trying to work on. And am I clearly hearing? That's that second circle space. And I know we did some intentional breathing and that was calming. That's not to say that second circle can't be loud and fast and funny. It's just, where is your focus? Are you focusing here? Or are you being loud and fast and engaged with the other person and responding in the moment to what's actually happening, as opposed to trying to dominate your will or reacting to what might be triggering some stress for you? So when we find ourselves in second circle, it's because we're in a familiar situation, we're comfortable there, we're feeling unjudged. Could be that I really enjoy what's going on here and it matters to me. And I want to know more. I'm genuinely curious. When I ask people when they naturally find themselves in second circle, what almost everyone says is, oh, when I am with my family or with really close friends. And the reason we naturally find ourselves in second circle there is because we know that terrain. And we know we've got institutional history of that group dynamic, that you know how they're going to respond and how you're going to respond to any given moment. And if your family's like my family, they may be judging you, but you got like, I got this. I know how to navigate this situation. So here's my homework for you around second circle, is to pay attention to those moments, start to identify them, start to become more aware of when you naturally find yourself in second circle, and note how you are physically feeling. Notice how you're breathing. That's step one. Then step two is becoming aware of in these stressful situations when you're not in second circle, first or third, and go, you know what? I'm going to use that intentional breathing that Jay taught me to, even though I'm stressed, I'm going to let my body tell my brain, I've got this. I'm going to make a conscious intentional choice to shift physically into that second circle space. Use the breath to refocus and re-engage with purpose, paying attention to what's going on the other side of the conversation. Just knowing you're not there is the first step into second circle behavior and interaction. So another opportunity to reflect and process what you're learning. Again, populate the chat or ask a question about second circle. And this, I want you to start to hold yourself accountable a little bit and look to the future to see how you can practically apply what we've been learning here. Here's your chat question. How can you use intentional breathing or the second circle to help your team achieve better results? And then, of course, the Q&A is available for you for questions to send to me. So I will await Colin to scroll through your responses, and then he'll feed them to me in a moment or two.
Colin, you're on mute.
Thank you. Good catch. This is like, that's the perfect setup for Matthias's question. Matthias's question is, with the new reality of most conversations and relationships being built this way through cameras and microphones that can be muted, what are the tendencies or harder challenges with achieving like second circle presence?
Well, I'll ask groups of people I'm working with when we're digging more deeply into second circle. I'll ask them, like, in these virtual spaces, where do you tend to go most? And I think the number one answer, and I would assume it's the same with this group, is we go to first circle. It's too easy to disconnect, and it's very challenging. Like, you notice, or like, I can't see any of you on this webinar. But even if I were able to see some of you in your little digital boxes, I've trained myself to look at that little green light. So it's as if I'm looking you in the eye, but I've been disconnected. So I think, as important as it is in live interactions, it's just more so. And I'm going to sound like a broken record because I think it is, again, foundational and can be transformational. We need to be aware of what patterns we're creating, how do we allow ourselves to be distracted, and make an intentional choice to reconnect. We can spiral in and out of first, second, and third in a matter of seconds. It's about being mindful and intentional with how you're engaging and making an effective choice. And then be compassionate with yourself. You're going to go to first. You're going to go to third. That's just the reality of the situation. But use this language, this framework, to help you become more aware of that disconnection more quickly, and then use that intentional breathing to reconnect and re-engage in a real way.
That's helpful. And so when I think about intention, you use the phrase specifically, making a choice. Emily Price had a kind of a good question about this. So is it worth thinking about like a replacement technique, like making a choice that I'm going to go into this conversation and like imagine that I'm speaking with my brother as opposed to this client, so that I find myself in the second circle zone?
I love what this question is getting at, which is using our imagination. That is one of the skills in the Actor's Toolkit that I didn't put on the screen. Yes, each of us needs to develop our individual strategies for how we find and maintain second circle. What I love, Colin, what was her name that had that question about the brother? Emily. What I love, what Emily's reaching for there is what came to mind, how I might use that is as if I'm talking to another person on screen, I'm like, oh, what's the similarity with this person and my brother? What that causes us to do is start to pay closer attention to that other person. At its core, second circle is shifting focus from self to the other person. Human beings love pattern and routine, but the problem is we set those pattern and routine way back here. And we're on another Zoom call. We're still operating out of old patterns because that's the way our brains work. So little techniques, what Emily is sharing, is a way to remind us that even though this is our 15th Zoom call of the morning, it's really the very first time this interaction is happening. And so an excellent suggestion is to use your imagination to look for connections, because it's going to help you zero in on what's really happening, a way to remember to do that. Thanks, Emily.
That's a great exercise. I really like that. I might use that myself.
Yeah.
One last question here, if you have time, from
Sure.
Avinash. So he's saying, as you noted, I think a lot of sales folks tend to fall, at least this is the stereotype, into third circle, being kind of overly confident, maybe a little loud, maybe talking too fast, not leaving space. His question is, does that mean that second circle could make others perceive you as a little bit more conservative? Which I thought was an interesting way of framing that comparison.
Yeah, I'm glad that came. I repeat what I said a minute ago, because it's getting to the heart of this question. Second circle doesn't have to be like, hey, yeah, I'm like really zoned into you. I'm using the breath to, it's creating this Zen moment. Second circle can be loud and fast. Those of you who are tennis players, or you get out on the basketball court, when you're in the zone, right? You've practiced, and it's like it's as if it's magic. That's second circle, because you're paying attention to what's going on. And if you're paying attention and you realize, hey, I think I need to dial up the volume of my voice a little bit, to that person they may be being a little distracted. Maybe I've had too much of the same verbal pattern, and I might be sounding a little dull and boring. I'm paying attention to that. So I'm going to make a little shift. That's still second circle. It may be that I need to pull back and be a little quieter and ask a provocative question that pulls that person into second circle. Yeah, second circle couldn't, it's very powerful because you are paying attention and making a choice to meet the needs of the other person on that conversation. Thank you for that. Now, before I offer you our last tool, I would remind us that the performance we want takes practice, and too often we don't rehearse like we should. And this is particularly difficult when you're trying to put breathing and second circle into practice as a solo activity. But rehearsing is so critical, particularly when we're learning something new. And a great tool that I have used to help non-theater clients rehearse what they've been learning in Alliance at Work is VoiceVibes. VoiceVibes is an AI technology that helps people continue to find their true and authentic voice and continue to explore ways to increase its power and effectiveness, turning their authenticity into that competitive advantage I was talking about earlier, but practicing on their own. VoiceVibes is a self-guided online tool that allows people to create and practice user-created assignments, and they record that into VoiceVibes, and then they receive an automated coaching and feedback on that particular delivery. So they're taking what they've learned with the Actors Toolkit, and my clients use tools like VoiceVibes to establish a baseline for positive and effective communication. They're able to assess their individual areas for improvement. They interpret that AI-generated feedback and tips so that they can predict how they will be likely perceived by other people. Now, it's so cool. The way that VoiceVibes works, it's built on a set of data sets to measure human perception of the voice. It's a vast amount, maybe even the largest data set in the world in this space, to assess how the average person would receive our voice. In other words, VoiceVibes analysis tells you the vibe of a typical audience, how they're going to get you, both positive and negative. So based on what VoiceVibes tells you around a recording, we'll let you know, are you coming across as authentic, confident, clear, and assertive, or are we coming across unapproachable, confusing, or detached? And VoiceVibes arrives at these assessments by unpacking your vocal dynamics. In other words, are you being intentional with your volume, with your pace, with your pitch? And are those choices you are making, are they supporting your message? And it even does word spotting, the ums, the uhs, the likes, the so's, those things that all of us deal with. It can help you identify those and tell you very specifically in your recording where they happened, so that you can eliminate or at least lessen these verbal fillers. And the platform can also assess a two-person conversation. Speakers are separated so that you can view each one of their recordings separately, but you still get automated feedback on their vibes, their clarity, their pacing. And what's different from the single speaker VoiceVibe assessment is that you're going to be given conversation metrics about what % of the time you did the speaking. Some third circle behavior there. We've all been there when you've got a third circle person taking up most of the time, or maybe a first circle not taking up as much as you need to. When and where were questions asked? And VoiceVibes will also tell you where the conversation was most engaging. And it also generates some next steps for you to consider. It's like, hey, you were like not in the ideal range to have a deliberate and useful pacing. So here's some things for you to think about. And what I love and how I've worked with it with my clients is it gives me a space as their human coach to then support those next steps and to continue to give additional comment. Now, this has expanded the way I'm able to work with my clients in two important ways. And the first is that it extends the learning that I'm trying to create. A little over a year ago, one of my clients introduced me to VoiceVibes, this artificial intelligence tool, which just was immediately intriguing from that perspective. And this client is a global professional services firm. And a major need they have is to increase their people's ability to cross-sell. They need their accountants and their auditors to deliver a compelling case for their business advisory, a third of their work, so that accountants and auditors can recognize, oh, here's an opportunity with an existing client. Let me sell that cybersecurity business. And not to be too stereotypical here, but accountants and auditors at times can be a bit dry in their delivery. So they bring me in to help shape and share the messaging that these people are using to share the value of what they do. This is done in a big group session, and there's some follow-up small coaching. But after I'm done, they're on their own. So this client engaged with VoiceVibes to make that learning more sustained and scalable. So I worked with the client to create some assignments that based on real life selling situations that go into VoiceVibes, and then their folks can go in and respond to those, practice as many times as they want, and get automated feedback from VoiceVibes. And it also allows me to go in and listen to those and provide some additional coaching. The second way VoiceVibes has been helpful to me is it helps my clients answer this very touchy question. It's almost impossible to have this kind of conversation. And we have to be very careful so that this kind of feedback doesn't come across as a personal attack. And we need to make sure that we're separating our professional opinion versus our personal taste. And VoiceVibes can help my clients have this sensitive conversation. With VoiceVibes, the AI lets the person know that they might be coming across as boring. And the tool explains what's driving that assessment and then provides some really useful tips to improve. So VoiceVibes is opening a door for you to have this sensitive conversation, but in a really useful and meaningful way. Now, when I was prepping for this session, I was talking with Colin, and I was explaining this. He's like, "Oh, wow! I wish one of my managers had this tool." Colin, you want to hop on and share what you shared with me the other day?
Yeah. So, to those of you who don't know me, I was an account manager at a marketing agency with a quota at the start of my career. This was maybe 8 years ago, 10 years ago. My manager brought in somebody not too unlike yourself, Jay. It was an actor in the Boston area, somebody who had a lot of communications training, and he was more so a coach and a consultant. He did communications training for Dunkin' Donuts and all kinds of things. And he came in. I did one role play with him, and he delivered. He was a pro. He really did deliver the feedback really well. But his feedback to me was, you come across as kind of condescending and arrogant. And it was really hard for me so that stuck in my craw, right? And for a long time, I thought, what does that say about me as a person? And I had a hard time because of that. I had a hard time actually implementing the feedback when, over time, I still work on it, but I did kind of accept that that's more of just the way I communicate and not necessarily me as a person. So he came in one time and gave me a coaching. I wish I had it ongoing. And the other thing I wish that I had that it seems like VoiceVibes would be great for is a positive example. Like, what does it sound like, or what does it feel like when I do a good job not being condescending? Because all I had was, he pointed out some mistakes that I made.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Colin. And I was going to ask you, like, what else would have been useful? So thanks for thinking ahead of me. That's what I was going to ask, because the power of VoiceVibes, that was one time in a very artificial role play with that coach. And that's, one shot I came across as arrogant and condescending, which is probably not how you come off most of the time. With VoiceVibes, you could re-record and make adjustments just by yourself, which is a little less intimidating. And then if, folks know that you have that tool, they can ask in some very helpful questions, ask you to share what you're learning about yourself in VoiceVibes and take the conversation from there. Deb, you got any additional information to share about
the
statistics?
That was interesting, Colin, to your point about getting a good example. Well, what we show in VoiceVibes is you can see where you were arrogant or where you were boring or where you were confident and authentic, which we know is the ideal. So the beauty of VoiceVibes is you can learn within the context of your own audio. Because if you're doing it enough, chances are you're going to get some negative examples, but you're also going to have a ton of positive examples. And to Jay's earlier point, what I've learned is my highest authentic and confident scores are when I'm really not trying. Like if I'm accidentally recording myself just talking to someone, to your point, Jay, but like my brother or someone who I know and I'm in my second circle, that's where my scores are the highest. So I've learned over time as I went and saw my examples in my own recordings that those natural states were where I scored highest. So I can go listen to that, and then that helps me to practice the right skills.
Thank you, Deb.
So fascinating.
And friends, that's our time. I know it was a jam-packed hour. I appreciate your attention and your engagement in the Q&A and the chat. A reminder of your homework assignments. Remember to practice your intentional breathing. Use that second circle framework to become more aware of how you're engaging, to break us out of that self-focus and put our focus on our scene partner. And then check out VoiceVibes so that you can practice breathing and being in second circle on those recordings, and use that tool for some self-guided learning. And with that, I leave you this final thought. No matter what stage you find yourself on, go out there and be present and connected. Stay curious, make intentional choices, and remember to be authentic, and don't fall off the stage. Thank you very much. Feel free to email me if you're interested in learning more about Alliance at Work or VoiceVibes. Want to make sure we continue the conversation and support you in your learning path. Thank you so much. And Colin, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah, just another shout out to our sponsor, Big Tin Can, who made this session possible. Thank you, Big Tin Can, for bringing Jay and Debra on to teach us. We've got hundreds of thank yous rolling in. If you want to keep the conversation going, go ahead and share one of your biggest takeaways on LinkedIn, and tag me and tag Jay or Debra or somebody, and we'll send you something nice. So just to make sure you're passing along your knowledge that you picked up here today, share on LinkedIn, tag me, and I'll send you something nice. And I hope to see you on some more community events from Sales Hacker soon, everybody. Take care.